Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Weaver. Welcome back to the Blue and Yellow Kitchen. In each episode, I make a dish inspired by a new book while talking to its author. Today's book is An Indian Among Los Indigenas, and I'm making rollo de queso, a Bolivian bread. I'd like to welcome Ursula Pike, author of An Indian Among Los Indigenas. Welcome, Ursula.
Hi, Stephanie. I'm so excited to be here.
It's so great to have you. So let's start by you telling us who is the Indian in the title of the book and who are Los Indigenas?
Well, the Indian in the title of the book is me. I'm a member of the Queruk tribe, which is a tribe from Northern California. And Los Indigenas are the indigenous Bolivians that I worked with for 2 years.
And that was in the Peace Corps, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So tell us a little bit about the book. What's this time setting of the book? How old are you? Just kind of give us like the overview of the framework of the memoir.
Right. Well, it's set in 1994 to 1996 when I was a Peace Corps volunteer and I was 26 years old. So, as I said, I am Queruk from Northern California, and Bolivia is the most indigenous country in South America. They have over 100 tribes. Native people are the majority of the population. So I expected an immediate connection, but that's not what happened. So the book explores the 2 years that I spent while I was volunteering at a children's home in a small community, trying to connect with Bolivians. And I learned that even with the best of intentions, cross-cultural attempts to help people can be complicated.
Yeah, there's a bunch of reasons why I've featured the book on the show, partly because I had not read a Peace Corps memoir. I love reading memoir by Native writers, and so that was interesting to me. It's a fascinating look at that time period. And also, I think you encounter this really interesting conundrum, which is you end up being sort of treated like a rich white person, and yet that's not your experience in this country at all. And so it's sort of the whole question of what's the nature of help, and are we really helping when we go to another country to try to do these things? Often that's called white savior, but and so it's just so interesting, and I felt very much like I got to know you, and I felt like you inhabited that 26, 27-8-year-old voice really, really well.
Well, thank you.
I also love travel memoirs, so I'm always up for a good kind of armchair travel read, so that's another thing that
Yes.
made me
too.
want to pick it up as well. So the recipe I'm making today is rollo de queso, and we chose it because Ursula made these in her bakery project, so it's an integral part of the story. Tell us what it is, and also explain to the readers what this project was in sort of the scope of your being there for the 2 years.
So I was working in this children's home that had kids from first till senior. They were all ages. And there was already an existing project that a previous volunteer had started, making these little guitars that are called charangos. But the girls weren't really getting involved with that project. And one time my supervisor in Peace Corps came and was offering some suggestions for things that I could do. And so we decided to start this bakery project because that's something that the girls at the center would be involved in. And our school, the center, was located right across from the market. And so there were always people walking around and selling baked goods. And so we were able to capitalize on that location, and they knew how to bake. They baked bread every week for the children's center to feed the kids. So they had some ovens and experienced baking. So we would make these products, and then they would sell them on the weekend at the market across the street.
Great. And so one of the things that I found so fascinating, readers, about this was that my assumption was there's a lot of resources that go into training a Peace Corps volunteer. There's training before they leave. There's training once they get in country. There's cultural training. There's, the stipend, to have that person there in that country. And I just was shocked that you were thrown into this town and basically said, figure out a project. And I just assumed you would be taking over some project for someone who was leaving. And I was so stunned to find out that you were just sort of told, like, figure out something that will help these kids. And then you just weren't really given any resources. Is that common with Peace Corps, or do you know if that's mainly your experience, or?
I think it differs from volunteer to volunteer. I have friends who went into more structured environments, who had more specific jobs that they were doing. I have a friend that I talk about in the book who was a graphic designer and went to work with a home for girls who were coming off the street, and they made cards, and she helped them revamp their card business. But others were not in structured positions. Mine was somewhat structured in that there had been a previous volunteer, and she was able to start this charango workshop, but it was already started and kind of moving along, and my role was to figure out what else I could do at this children's home. And so the visit from my supervisor to try and help me was to try and help me and figure out what I could do.
Gotcha. Okay. So that actually starts to set up the passage that I've asked Ursula to read. So why don't you go ahead and set it up and go ahead and read it, and then we'll talk about a little bit more about the recipe. It should be done in around the same time, but hopefully it'll work out. So go ahead and set up who's in this passage, and then go ahead and read it for us.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this is a visit from my supervisor. Her name is Carmen, and she is a Bolivian who is visiting me to help identify what I was doing, what I could do. I was a little bit intimidated by this because I really was not comfortable with what I was doing, or I felt like I wasn't doing enough. I felt that I was falling short, and I wasn't a very good volunteer. And I was worried that she would come in and say, you're not being a good volunteer. So that's where we have this conversation. After I've kind of told her everything that I had been doing and everything I was working on, and then we sit down and start talking. And she says, what about a bakery project with the girls? Involve the kids, not just the bakery, but in the planning. You need them to take part in every step of the process. But every store in town sells bread, I said. Then figure out what isn't being sold and make that. Have the kids do the feasibility study. I was not an entrepreneur, but the wheels in my head started turning. This isn't about money. She turned and looked me straight in the eye. This is about giving kids skills that will make them successful. Anything you can do to help them understand that they have options in life will be worthwhile. Carmen fell silent for a long moment, and I attempted to start a conversation about microlending and the Grameen Bank. I wanted her to have some confidence in me, and I wanted to show her I understood the concepts of development, even if I did not personally know how to start a development project. I exhaled with relief as the shiny Toyota finally disappeared down the cobblestone street. I wasn't sure where to start, but knew that I had to show Carmen that I had at least tried. A few weeks into the project, the girls discussed what they wanted to make and sell based on their research. Rollos, the sweet turnovers full of jam, were their number one choice. I looked at their faces and for the first time felt like a real volunteer. This was what I had imagined Peace Corps would be like. and how I had pictured myself when I saw brochures full of blonde, freckled girls intently explaining something to African women in headscarves. I wondered if this moment with them would be good for a brochure. Of course, it would be difficult to tell who was saving whom, because their hair was like mine, dark brown, and our skin was the same. They could be my cousins.
So, thank you. And I loved that passage so much because I think it, for me, it sort of captured the that naivete and that wanting to save the world, and also that whole notion of America going out and, you know, that sort of colonial thing that America has about going out and helping people in other countries, and so it really captured that sort of challenge for you of wanting to connect, believing you would have this instant connection, and yet not feeling that and not being seen that way. How did that feel for you? You know, there was a scene where you talk about how you could pass for local native, and yet you rarely did. Was that something you were kind of dealing with all the time while you were there the 2 years?
Yes, it was. So in the cities, I would often be mistaken for a Bolivian. And it was a difficult situation sometimes for me because I would be with Westerners, I would be with other people from the United States who maybe looked less indigenous, you know, who white or blonde, and so a person would say, "Why are you with these people?" Or they would address me in Spanish and address them in English. And it wasn't necessarily a problem, but it did make me question my experience, or why I sometimes felt a need to say, no, I'm with them, and maybe purposely mispronounce a word in Spanish and make it clear that I was also with them. But then later I would think, why did I do that?
Got it. So tell us a little bit more about your writing process. When did you decide to do the memoir? How long have you been thinking about it? Kind of give us that overview.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm a compulsive journaler. I have always kept a journal. I keep a journal now. And the whole time I was in Bolivia, I had journals. One of my aunts sent me a package with like 6 or 7 journals. But I was able to buy journals there too, and just write. And it helped me understand what I was going through. It helped me process what I was dealing with. And when I returned to the US, I really was trying to understand my experience, especially within the context of my identity as a Native person. And while I was able to find books by Native authors, great books by Native authors, and other great books by people who had worked either in the Peace Corps or other development projects and travel memoirs, there was nothing that was really kind of a combination of all of those. And I found an essay by a Native writer. Her name is Zitkala Sa. She's Yankton, Dakota. And she wrote this essay in 1921 called An Indian Teacher Among Indians, about working in the Carlisle School, which was an Indian boarding school that she herself had attended. And it really got to the heart of this complicated place of being from the population that's being served, but then also being the people serving them. And it gave me a really good framework in which to interpret my story. So in 2014, I started a MFA program at the Institute for American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. And through that, I was able to flesh out the manuscript and work on it and get really good feedback from both Native and non-Native instructors.
That's awesome. Okay, well, the rollo just came out, and so you're going to tell me if they look okay, because I mentioned to her I had a little bit of an issue. So first of all, I'm going to show the camera. Is that good, microwave boy? Okay. So you can see there, and then How's that? Whoops.
Yeah, they look good. They look good.
So there's a little bit of exploding that happened. So I overfilled them. Long story. I'm going to adjust it for the blog post. But and these are not marmalade filled. So we couldn't find a recipe online for the sweet version of with the marmalade. So these are the cheese version. So they call for Monterey Jack, and I had to turn it into a gluten-free recipe. So the main tip I'm going to say is to make sure you roll them out really thinly, but also let the dough rest for 20 minutes before you roll it out, because that's really important for the dough to hydrate so it doesn't crack. And the first time I made it, it was just one. But Ursula said, you said that they sold them they're more like the Hot Pocket size is what you said, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, they were making them to sell at the market. And so they would take them and wrap them up in a napkin and sell them, walk around and sell them. And actually on the cover of my book, there's a picture of a traditional Bolivian woman carrying a basket. And it was that kind of a basket that they would use to put the rollos in and walk around and sell.
Great. So let me just move that out of the way. And it smells amazing. So my take on it is the dough itself is similar. If you've had empanada, it's similar to that. But then you've got this, it's an egg white and cheese filling, which is why they get all puffy, which is really kind of cool. And okay, so the girls, did they have success selling them? Was it fun for them? Tell us about that. I'm just going to break it open to make sure it's not crazy hot before I bite into it.
Yeah, they did have fun, and actually they were able to work with some of the other kids, some of the boys within the center, and they would go and they would sell them, and we would pay them a little bit to sell them. And so they were able to involve the other people within the center, and that was great that they incorporated more than just themselves. But to me, what was even more interesting is that we went on a break, like Christmas break, and when we came back, there was a freezer that somebody had donated to the children's center. And so they decided to start also making popsicles, because that was a popular thing to sell in the market. And they involved the boys in that, and they started making these popsicles and freezing them and selling them. And that was all their idea. I helped them a little bit with making the project happen, maybe getting some supplies, but that was all their idea. And then they decided what to do with the money. And what they decided to do was buy an iron so they could iron their clothes, because we didn't have one.
Oh, that's awesome. So the focus was really kind of teaching the entrepreneurial spirit and how to manage a business. And then it's great that that then translated to more ideas for them, which is really cool. So I just had a taste. They are crispy on the outside. That you can see that there's a lot of air in them, which is definitely what you want. And the cheesy filling is warm and delicious. And so thank you so much for introducing me. This is Monterey Jack, a pepper jack, which does add a lot of nice flavor. You can also make it with queso fresco, but it's much blander, so I do recommend doing it with Monterey Jack. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and last question, do you have like a favorite character or moment in the book?
Oh, I definitely have a favorite moment. It's when I first went to the Children's Center, and I met the director of the Children's Center, and he was a nice enough guy. He showed me around, but then he took me to the kitchen, which was like the center of the Children's Center. It was like the heart of it. And I met 3 women. I met the cook's helper, and one of the teachers. And they immediately started joking with me and teasing me. And I knew that I could become friends with them. I was so excited because they were warm and welcoming and just open. And I ended up becoming very close with the 3 of them, and they all helped me so much in the bakery project, but then just trying to exist in this town that I didn't know anybody.
That's great. Ursula, thank you so much for being here today. You'll find the recipe link in the Facebook video or on my website, migrainereliefrecipes.com. Find her at ursulapike.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend. And you can order a copy of An Indian Among Los Indigenas wherever you like to buy books. This is her pub week, so congratulations on that. And if you aren't able to buy books, support an author by asking your local library to order their book, because that really helps authors as well. You can follow me at sweavermph so you don't miss an episode, and join us next time for another author interview and a dish inspired by their book. Thanks so much for watching The Blue and Yellow Kitchen.